Welcome to Tower Bridge again. When we were researching the photographs from the Edward Crodwell collection, they raised certain questions about Victorian society and Victorian life in general, and especially the photographs taken on 9th of July, they seem to lack representation from certain communities which we know were present at the time in London. So we decided to get in touch with Michael Ohajuru. He's a historian, and to talk with him about these communities and about the research he's done. Michael, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Michael Ohajuru. I'm an art and cultural historian. I'm currently writing a book, A Guide to Black London. And my passion is cultural history. I see myself as a cultural historian, and particularly in Britain, British history, the black presence in Britain. Black presence has been really part of London for centuries, and that's what the book will map. I'm driven by there's a famous or infamous opening sentence to Peter Fryer's Staying Power. That's the seminal text on black people in England. He says there were Africans in Britain before the English. And that gets a lot of people upset. But then it speaks to really England. It's an island. Everybody comes from somewhere. Everyone's come to here. And I'm interested in that journey, and specifically the journey of black people. And hopefully we'll touch on all the other people who have come to make Britain, and in particular London, the great city it was and is today.
It's a very interesting one, isn't it? Because many people don't think black history in Britain starts before the 1950s, but we do know for a fact there were communities long before that.
There's so many markers that they've left are with us today, and again, hopefully we'll touch on some of that.
It's all long before Windrush, and that's where we are here also with Tower Bridge. And these photographs we have from 9th of July, 1894, i.e. the public opening after the royal opening, where we have these photographs of groups of people, and I'm going to take one of these here. And they're quite striking, isn't it? For many, many reasons, and I'd like you to have a look at them.
Where do we begin? Each is a character and he has some person, a wonderful picture, a snapshot. But the one thing that I was going to say had to concern me, because I'm always looking for this, my instinctive response, were the black people? Because we know there were black people in London in 1894, but there aren't any in this picture. Not only that I would argue are black as I know, but it's an extraordinary snapshot of a time.
So England at the time clearly was a very exciting place for engineering and for architecture, and there was a lot going on, and Tower Bridge sits in this context of development in the Victorian age.
I think this is a really exciting time, because in some ways the Victorians were really dynamic. In terms of they'd knock anything down and build immediately. Right now we have a sense of continuity in history, we're always challenged, but they just did it and built it. And the 1890s was a fantastic time. And this bridge, the technology on the bridge, was all part of that. That kind of London as a dynamic city. If you look at London at that time, London was the heart of the empire. This is almost the height of Victorian times, and was one of the great cities of the world. So it was a magnet for many people. We would call them economic migrants today, but there's people looking for fame and fortune. But they didn't just come here through boats, through commerce. There's also people who came here to escape. And there was different types of people who come from different parts of the world. If we kind of break it down, in this period, we're looking at trading ships, the teas, the coffees, the timber, these goods that were traded and imported and exported in out of London, they would have come from literally all over the world. Most of the seamen would have been ordinary seamen doing lowly jobs. Almost 20% were foreign. I'm not saying they were all black people, but they were foreign. So you've got Caribbeans, you've got Chinese people, and you've got people coming from Africa. So you've got a complete mixture of people coming by sea. I looked into this and I couldn't really find any great signals for it, whether they made their way up in society. I don't think that's the case. Because at the time, there was a developing middle class here. That's the one the Victorians created. The English people who worked here, there was a rise in middle class. And you look at the city London itself, what was it? I sort of figured at the turn of the century, at the start of the century, the 19th century, it was about 2 million. By then it was almost 6 million, over 6 million. So it was an expanding city, and these people were coming, and there was opportunities.
Michael, when these people arrived here in London, was there any specific areas where they decided to settle and make their homes?
That's a great question in the sense that, yes, they did. And there was Irish communities, Jewish communities, there was Asian communities, specific areas of London which we can recognize to this day. How do you do that now? Because they leave a print, they leave a footprint, often one of two places, sometimes in the pubs, and sadly many of the pubs have gone now, but we know from the clientele of the pubs, but also their places of worship where they sought their God. I should mention ayahs. Well, who are ayahs? These were Indian grannies. There was many of them. These were grannies for children. These were Asian women, Indian women who came over for people from the colonies who were the civil service and the like. And they were nannies, and they would have been well known on the streets of the posher parts of London, the Kensingtons, the Chelseas. Black people who came on boats, and they saw opportunities to do work here, low-level work in and around the dock area. They documented some of the pubs around here where we know had a black presence.
It sounds like it's a question of sources again. So what are the sources you draw on? You mentioned places of worship and probably there are registered link to that. But what other sources do you have to explore this part of London's history?
It really is detective work, because often it's not as easy to say if it's an African, because you could have some white people born in Africa, particularly South Africa, or equally from the Caribbean, because there was a time when to be called a West Indian meant you were a white person. So but we get a sense of it from the census of the time, and also we know there were celebrated black people in the day, people like Sarah Forbes Bonetta. She was Queen Victoria's goddaughter, or Mary Seacole. So we know there were, from their records, then we can trace who they connected with, what was their network, so you can work out from them to try and build up them. It's very much piecework and patchwork. They're there. The record of black people is there, but you have to work at it to actually unpick it. You know, when you showed me that picture of the opening day, I was saddened, but not surprised that there weren't any black people. But I know there would have been black people who have crossed that bridge that day. There would have been, because by virtue of the fact they were there, we know they were there, not in the tens of thousands. They've left their footprints, often anecdotal, sometimes in a song. You know, they might write songs about them, sometimes in a play.
This is interesting because there seems to be a current interest in exploring family histories and linking in with that element as well.
Exactly. And I think what's so exciting about it, history has moved on. You know, the history that you and I taught was about great men doing great things and great countries doing great things. And it almost seemed a linear thing. It was kind of a process. Whereas now we know that history is much more complex. And it's much more, did I say, diverse, it's much more inclusive, much more integrated. The word I like to use is messy. You know, it's not beautiful. It's not as what we'd like it to be. And that's what the challenge is with teaching history today, getting that messiness, but trying to put some order to it and relate to it. But in that messiness, we are.
Michael, we did some research and we came across this Indian engineer, Keshavji Jamtibubati, who came over here specifically to be trained as an engineer in Windsor at the Imperial College for Engineers. And there seemed to be a tradition of people coming over here to be trained in the English system.
I was fascinated in the sense that he came here to study engineering, where equally there were many people who came to Britain to study. I'm talking about West Africa now. Doctors, they came over here to be educated here, and lawyers. And many of them settled here and became quite influential, both socially in terms of making a difference for black people here. But they were led by educated people who were part of wealthy families. And that in some ways goes back to, back in history, there would always, the wealthy family, the African families would send their children here to be educated. But the same way doctors, West Indians, West Africans were trained as doctors. They've been given the entree. Their title gave them the opportunity to be a doctor. They had that connection to do it. And they could only do that because they had the resources and the money to be given the opportunity. Working class people on that bridge, the more I think about it, it would have been hard for them to actually get a job. So as one of the actual constructors of the bridge.
I'm looking at the photograph of the 9th of July again, the public opening, and what becomes really, really apparent is that it's all white and working and middle class representatives here. Do we have any explanation where the other communities which we've talked about might be at this stage?
I understand that there was no announcement for this. I'm still challenged as to why there's nobody there. I would have expected them to be there, because I know they were there. When I say you know they were, how come I'm so confident? Well, as I say, 20% of the seamen who came into the port were foreign, and they would have settled in and around the port. They would have done jobs. But then when I think about it, what kind of jobs could they have done? They would have been labouring jobs, and labouring jobs were very transient. They were day jobs. So maybe they weren't there because they were all working. I don't know, maybe there's that sense to it. Other than maybe because they didn't find out about it, because no one in their family was part of the chain that knew about it. It's unsatisfactory, but that's the best I can do. Looking at the other pictures, I don't see any black people in there. But then again, when you think about it, they would have been apprentices, the people doing the carrying and fetching for the workmen. That would have been part of their route to becoming the riveter or the tarmac Adam, and they would have been part of that tradition or that job. And black people, Chinese Jews, were not allowed to enter into that profession.
We know, for example, the riveters were brought in from the company who provided the steel and so on. There were often families, and often families of Irish descent.
Yeah, no, I can imagine.
So we know of a particular family, Heaney, where the whole family from the son to the uncle were involved in the business, and they were in crews working on the bridge.
That makes perfect sense in terms of you did what your dad did, or your dad got you the job in, come and join me, son. He recommended you, and that was your part of your recommendation because your dad approved of you. So for black people to get jobs there, I think it was almost impossible.
No, thank you, Michael. It's been fascinating talking to you about Victorian London, Victorian society, and for you to share your research and experience.
Well, Dirk, thank you, because it's been a great pleasure to research into these pictures, research in this area of London, and research into Victorian London, and to see the progress that's been made, or was being made at the time. So now it's been a real privilege and honor, so thank you.